Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, crunch time, a standoff in the Senate as Democratic leadership works to piece together a government spending bill that would not only appease their Republican colleagues, but steer the country away from another looming shutdown for now. Meanwhile, mounting frustration among the Democratic ranks, the controversial White House negotiations, as President Biden fights for his multi-trillion-dollar agenda. War of words. Top Pentagon officials are back on Capitol Hill this morning after a bombshell first day of testimony on the U.S.'s withdrawal from Afghanistan. The top generals contradicting President Biden's claims that none of his advisors told him to keep a small number of troops in the embattled country to prevent a Taliban takeover. How the White House is responding and what we can expect to hear this morning. Also this morning, past the peak, some promising news on the COVID front as we head into fall. Those summer COVID hotspots across the South finally seem like they're cooling off. We'll revisit one Mississippi ICU recently overflowing with patients and desperate for medical staff to get an update on its current condition. Plus, Dr. Fauci on America's booster shot confusion. And Spears' showdown. Another critical day in court for the pop icon, with the fate of her father's role in that controversial conservatorship to be decided just hours from now. The shocking new allegations of phone tapping serving as background to today's hearing. That is a story that, of course, just keeps having more and more details as we head into this big day.
Yeah, a lot of big developments, a lot of people anxious to see how the judge is going to handle all these new developments.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have our Danny Savalas to walk us through all of it. We begin this morning, though, with the economy hurtling toward a fiscal cliff.
Democrats are trying to avoid two crises. The government could shut down Thursday night at midnight, and then a few weeks later, the possibility that the U.S. could default on its debts if action isn't taken to raise the debt limit. Well, Democrats control both chambers of Congress. They face strong opposition from Senate Republicans, who so far blocked efforts to extend the nation's borrowing limit. On top of those pressing budget issues, the president is canceling a trip to Chicago today so he can work to convince Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to vote for his entire economic plan. Senate Budget Committee Chair Bernie Sanders called on House progressives to vote against the bipartisan infrastructure bill until Congress also passes that larger social safety net package, the Democrats' only reconciliation bill.
And my fear is that if the dual agreement that was reached is broken, and we just passed the infrastructure bill, the leverage that we have here in the Senate to pass the reconciliation bill will be largely gone.
Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly of Virginia put the infighting within his party this way, quote, "We have to understand we're in the situation of mutually assured destruction here." That sets the scene for our own NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale, who joins us with the latest on this make-or-break moment for Democrats. So, Ali, let's start with the shutdown showdown in Washington. It's coming down to the wire. Here's Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
So, look, it's time for our Democratic colleagues to stop dragging their heels and get moving.
Democrats have until tomorrow at midnight to avert a shutdown with a GOP filibuster firewall in the Senate. Ali, how can they get it done?
Joe, I think the really important way to look at the crises plaguing Congress right now are there are the deadlines that have political consequence, and then there are the deadlines that have actual economic consequence, both for the country overall and for individual American families. That's where we are on the government shutdown piece of this. You mentioned the government itself will shut down Thursday night at midnight. Agencies have already been told, as is standard operating procedure, to prepare for that reality. What Democrats have said all along is they don't want the government to shut down. They've tried to link it with that other debt ceiling crisis that, if the debt ceiling were not raised or suspended, could have cataclysmic, in the words of economists, impact on our economy. Democrats tried to couple those two things. Republicans not playing ball on this. They have not even engaged on the process. Yesterday, we saw Senator Chuck Schumer try to go it alone with Democrats, asking for unanimous consent in the Senate to move forward with just a simple 51-vote majority on suspending the debt ceiling. Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, blocked him on that front. Instead, McConnell wants them to go towards reconciliation. The way I've sort of been thinking about the way this has been going down in the Senate is it's like that scene in Harry Potter where they're going through that maze and all the doors keep closing until they get to the middle. That's pretty much what's happening to Democrats right now. Republicans continuing to push them towards the reconciliation path of raising the debt ceiling, but at the same time, Democrats say that's a non-starter because it's going to take too long. So that's the second crisis here. But first, government shutdown. They're likely to decouple those things and move forward with funding the government. Right now, it's looking like some reporting says that'll happen. The funding will go till early December. We're waiting to see that actually hit the floor.
So instead of Schoolhouse Rock, we have a Harry Potter analogy there. Very helpful, Allie. So progressives are also flexing their might. We just heard from Bernie Sanders there. In the House, they're promising to block the bipartisan infrastructure bill if the massive $3.5 trillion Democrats-only reconciliation bill isn't agreed upon. Is the push to pass both bills together still going to happen?
No, and we saw Speaker Nancy Pelosi decouple this previously linked process just a few days ago when she told her caucus that the House could no longer wait on the slow negotiations of the Senate. Here's Senator Bernie Sanders on that, though.
As you know, we started off on a dual effort. The agreement, as you heard, was we're going to go forward together in both infrastructure and reconciliation. And now there seems to be a reneging on that agreement, and that is upsetting to me. So we got to go forward together. Both of them need to be passed. Terribly important for the American people. But I don't want to create a situation where there is no leverage to pass reconciliation.
Leverage is, as ever, guys, the word of the day here in Washington and the word that we keep hearing on Capitol Hill. The reality is Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that they're likely to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill on Thursday. You heard Bernie Sanders there urging progressives not to vote for that bill so they don't lose their leverage on that larger social infrastructure package. They don't even really need that push. Most progressives that we are talking to every day say they're already not there on that larger social spending bill. It could mean Thursday we don't actually end up seeing that vote, because the thing that's always been true is Speaker Pelosi says she's not bringing a vote to the floor that doesn't have the votes to pass.
And Allie, quickly on this last one, let's stick with the leverage theme. We mentioned the president canceled the trip to Chicago to continue negotiations. The two critical Democratic holdouts, Senator Sinema and Manchin, who think the price tag on the reconciliation bill is too high. Does the president have any leverage over them?
Look, I covered this campaign. Biden ran as someone who could unite both sides of the political aisle. The realities of his presidency is he's not uniting both sides of the political aisle. He's playing peacemaker between two factions in his own party. The thing about Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, Manchin won't even give an overall price tag. They've both been meeting with the White House, but here's one of the latest conversations that we've had with Senator Manchin yesterday after he got back from that meeting with Biden. Listen to this.
I don't know how anyone could vote against it, and then we vote in good faith. Let's work in good faith towards the other bill and see what we can come to an agreement on. But, man, holding one hostage over the other is not fair. It's not right. It's not good for the country. You just have to negotiate in good faith. You have to have trust a little bit. Everybody's not going to get what they want, I don't think. But let's find out what the country needs.
So again, Manchin has been reluctant to give his top line, the policy things that must be included in reconciliation to get him on board. At the same time, though, he's voicing a frustration that progressives feel in the opposite fashion, which is to say he wants them to vote on the bipartisan bill. That's where his heart has always been on this. At the same time, progressives say, okay, we would like to vote on that bill, but we also need you to move forward on reconciliation. These sides have not changed. We're just getting down to the wire here now.
All right, Allie Vitale. Allie, thank you.
America's top military leaders are set to face another grilling later this morning when they testify again before Congress on the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan.
It comes after yesterday's bombshell hearing. Generals Frank McKenzie and Mark Milley appeared to contradict President Biden's claim that he was never advised to leave some troops behind in Afghanistan. NBC's Pentagon and National Security correspondent Courtney Kuby has more on their blunt testimony.
Savannah and Joe, on Tuesday, we heard stunning testimony from the nation's top military leaders about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, including how they recommended to President Biden earlier this year to keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan. And we even heard from one top military leader who said that the war there was lost. This blunt assessment from the president's top military advisor.
Strategically, the war is lost. The enemy's in Kabul.
All as Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley, General Frank McKenzie, and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin were grilled by Republicans over the chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal.
Nobody has resigned.
General, I think you should resign. Secretary Austin, I think you should resign.
The top brass were also pressed about President Biden's claim that none of his military leaders advised him to keep at least 2,500 troops in Afghanistan to avoid a Taliban takeover.
No one said that to me that I can recall.
Those military advisors openly contradicting the commander-in-chief.
I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan.
And testifying the president did hear their advice.
Did these officer and General Miller's recommendations get to the president personally?
Their input was received by the president.
The White House responding.
There were recommendations made by a range of his advisors, something he welcomed.
Meanwhile, Milley went further, also contradicting President Biden's assertion that the Afghanistan withdrawal was a, quote, extraordinary success.
Would you use the term extraordinary success for what took place in August in Afghanistan?
It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
And he was asked if the rushed exit that left Americans and Afghan allies behind damaged U.S. credibility.
I think that damage is one word that could be used, yes.
Later, Milley was pressed if he considered resigning because the president disregarded his advice.
Why haven't you resigned?
The president doesn't have to agree with that advice.
Milley also speaking about the outgoing days of the Trump administration when he reportedly told a Chinese general, if we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time.
I am certain that President Trump did not intend to attack the Chinese. My task at that time was to de-escalate.
And two other surprising admissions from General Mark Milley. Number one, that he spoke with a number of authors of recent tell-all books, including Bob Woodward. And also on the terror front, he acknowledged that al-Qaeda and ISIS may be able to rebuild in Afghanistan in as little as 12 months. Joe, Savannah.
Courtney, thank you so much. And now to what looks to be progress in the fight against the Delta variant. In summer hotspots, especially in the South, the surge appears to be past its peak. That includes Mississippi, where cases reached their highest point in the pandemic earlier this summer. Now they're on the decline, but more than 1,200 people are still testing positive for COVID every day. Last month, NBC News got a look inside a Mississippi ICU where hospital staff were overwhelmed as mostly unvaccinated patients filled beds there. 1 month later, the state's top health official says even though cases and hospitalizations are still too high, they're now heading in the right direction. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now from that very hospital in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Ellison, good morning. So you were the one who had this access there, where I know last month you talked to truly desperate hospital staff. What are they telling you now?
Hey, Savannah, yeah, and when we came back, we specifically wanted to talk to the exact same people that we spoke to, a month ago. I mean, just visually, when we walked onto the ICU floor this time, one of the most noticeable differences were that they actually had one room that was not in use. When we were here last time, every single one of their available ICU beds, available ICU rooms, they were full with COVID-19 patients. They even had patients in the emergency room where they'd kind of transitioned rooms that typically didn't hold people for very long into ICU capacity rooms for COVID patients because they were so overwhelmed. Now they say things are improving and they're actually manageable. Listen. How would you describe things now compared to a month and a half ago?
So under control, whereas before we felt that we were literally drowning, it doesn't feel like that anymore. At our worst, between our three hospitals, we had over 150 patients with COVID and about 35 patients on the ventilator. We're now down to just 43 patients between the three hospitals. We still have about 17 or 18 patients on the ventilator, though, but much better than it was.
So what's changing things here? Experts like Dr. Boblajita tell us that it's kind of a combination of things, that it is vaccination rates improving. It is also that so many people got sick. Doctors, they say that even if you contracted COVID-19, you should still get vaccinated because with natural immunity, the level of immunity, it really varies person to person. The time it lasts, it varies. It's not as guaranteed as a vaccine. The numbers here, the picture, it is complicated because on the one hand, you do have higher rates of vaccination, lower numbers of COVID hospitalizations, lower number of infection rates. But this state, Savannah, still has the highest death rate because of COVID-19 per capita. Savannah.
Yeah, Ellison, you mentioned higher vaccination rates. Now, at one point, Mississippi had the lowest in the whole country in terms of a vaccination rate. Now still in the bottom 5, but a little bit better. How's that going? Are hospital workers being able to convince more people to get the shot? Is that attributable at all here with things getting better?
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that we kept hearing from people we spoke to is that they wouldn't really have conversations with people by the time they got to the ICU about getting vaccinated. They were just trying to make sure they survived. But I spoke to one respiratory therapist a month ago who said she'd had multiple occasions where there were people begging her as they were about to be intubated to save her life and telling her that they regretted not getting vaccinated. One thing that respiratory therapist told us this time around is that she actually heard from some of her own friends, her own family members, after she spoke to us, who once they finally saw what was happening inside, they were reconsidering previously their position of not getting vaccinated. Listen.
After my last interview with you, I had quite a few, not only family members, friends, and a few people message me on Facebook as well, questioning about wanting more information about the vaccine and where they can find more research on the vaccine and things like that.
For people who weren't even asking before, but they weren't getting vaccinated.
Yeah, they were 100%, they were not getting vaccinated.
So things here, they are improving. They have improved, but they're still not out of the woods yet. One thing, Savannah, that doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists have mentioned to us is that they are a little bit nervous about what could come after the holiday season. People tend to gather large groups inside because it's cold, and they're worried that that could potentially lead them back into a place that is not as good as they are right now, if you will. Savannah.
All right, Ellison Barber, as always, thank you for your powerful reporting.
Let's bring in Dr. Boblajita. He's a professor at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine and the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph Health. Dr. Bob, good to have you with us. We've heard over and over again this is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated. We just heard there from a respiratory therapist Ellison spoke with about convincing skeptical people to get the shot. At this point, what do you think needs to be done to reach more unvaccinated people?
Things are beginning to work. Joe, we can't politicize this vaccine. I've said that all along. Testimony from those who are unvaccinated who survive, and believe me, there are many who survive, is a very powerful way. I often said if we could have people walk in our shoes through the intensive care unit and see all of the people on ventilators and those who are dying on a daily basis, people would change their minds. Breakthrough infections are expected after vaccination, but they're not going to kill you. They're not going to put you on a ventilator. That's what's really important for people to understand. Education is the key here.
Dr. Bob, one of the reasons that we love having you on this show so much is because you always give it to us straight. So help us with this one. Confusion around the booster shots. I mean, look, the rockout has been rolling, and that's to say that the rollout, has been rocky, and that's to say that the messaging and the guidance has just simply changed. I mean, it's different than it was, and people are unsure if they qualify. First, let's listen to what Dr. Anthony Fauci told nightly news anchor Lester Holt last night about what eventually might happen with booster shots.
My prediction, and this is purely my own personal opinion as a physician and as a healthcare and public health individual, is that ultimately the proper, complete regimen will be a single dose, followed in a few weeks by the second dose, followed several months later by the booster.
So, Dr. Bob, will we all have to get a booster shot eventually? I mean, what is it going to mean to be fully vaccinated? Is that going to change?
I think that's going to change, at least for the messenger RNA vaccines. I think to be fully vaccinated, the booster shot is incredibly important, particularly for those who are immunosuppressed on cancer drugs, have autoimmune diseases, those who are at risk, those over 65. Now, we are presuming that everybody's immune system is the same. And the booster shot kind of takes away the chanciness of that, saying that even if your immune system has a little deficiency, the booster shot's going to take you over the finish line and make sure you're protected.
All right, Dr. Boblajita, as always, thank you so much.
The parents of Gabby Petito are speaking to the media for the first time since their daughter's body was found. Their lawyer is demanding justice for Gabby and calling for her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, to turn himself in. As NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns reports, he also had some harsh words for Laundrie's family.
Petito's family speaking for the first time since her body was discovered in a Wyoming campground, demanding justice.
What does justice for Gabby look like from here?
Justice for Gabby is that we see justice for her homicide. The FBI has classified her death a homicide. They're investigating her death, and we believe through their investigation, we will have justice for Gabby.
The Petito's attorney blaming Brian Laundrie's family for not doing more to find him. The search for the person of interest in Gabby's disappearance yielding no results so far.
For the Laundrie's silence, the Laundries did not help us find Gabby. They're sure is not going to help us find Brian. For Brian, we're asking you to turn yourself in to the FBI or the nearest law enforcement agency.
The family's focus now honoring her.
I noticed Mom and Dad have some new tattoos that resemble that of Gabby. Would you be willing to tell us about that?
Tattoos that Gabby designed herself. She was an artist, and
I wanted to have her with me all the time,
so we all.
I feel it. This helps.
We all put them.
New tattoos and a new foundation the family set up in Gabby's name to help others with missing children.
Some good can come out of it, that we can help other people that may be in a similar situation.
The family not commenting on the investigation, but thanking the media, law enforcement, and the FBI for their help.
It was amazing that we were able to get her, and we're just happy to have her.
Police say the search for Laundrie now scaled back, but targeted based on intelligence. The 23-year-old not charged or named as a suspect in Petito's murder, but there is a federal warrant out for his arrest for alleged misuse of a debit card after Petito's death.
Thank you, Dasha. Let's get a check now on your morning News Now weather.
Which means Bill Cairns joins us with a pink tie and hopefully a weekend forecast. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to make you wait for the weekend forecast and the next time you see me. So this time, we're going to focus on today and tomorrow, and then you have to be a little patient. We have to wait for the weekend. All right, so we have a lot of heavy rain overnight in areas from Houston all the way down through San Antonio. A lot of people woke up in the middle of the night from some really loud thunderstorms, a lot of lightning with these storms, too, especially the ones that went from Houston that are now down towards Galveston. As we go throughout the day today, this will eventually begin to move on out. Areas of Louisiana will start to shift into some of the rain. It's not going to be severe, but you will just need that umbrella today, especially areas from Shreveport, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lake Charles. Kansas City could have some stray showers and storms by 8 p.m. tonight. Another line of storms could be heading for the Dallas area, also in the northern plains across the Dakotas. Finally, you're going to cool off after a very hot stretch of fall weather. Temperatures will begin to return to normal, but you will have to deal with some thunderstorms. As far as rainfall totals, heaviest totals will be in Nebraska into areas of central Kansas and also central Texas into West Texas, Del Rio to Dallas. Hit and miss storms in areas of Louisiana. The areas that are going to see gorgeous weather, the Northeast is cool and crisp this morning, a perfect afternoon. Temperatures in the mid to upper 60s. The Northwest looks pretty good. Still a little warm from Chicago to St. Louis all the way down to Atlanta. And then tomorrow, kind of more of the same stagnant weather pattern with storms in the middle of the country, more gorgeous stuff in the Northeast, and no problems and no complaints at all in the Rockies. And one of my favorite things every year is to take a look at Colorado and especially the golden aspen leaves. They're one of the first to turn in the West, and I'm starting to see some pictures on social media. They're starting to look gorgeous, especially around one of my favorite places in Telluride.
Ooh, that's a good spot. All right, Bill, thank you so much, and we'll talk about the weekend in an hour. See you then.
Coming up, if you're fully vaxxed and looking to travel to Europe in the coming months, you might want to stick around after the break.
Yeah,
There's
we'll
a tease for you.
we'll tell you everything you need to know before you board that flight to a well-deserved vacation up next. Welcome back. Fully vaccinated Americans can now travel to Europe again, but what can you expect if you're planning to go overseas?
Well, our NBC News correspondent Tom Costello recently traveled to Europe, shows us firsthand.
While the U.S. has remained off limits to most international visitors, Europe reopened to fully vaccinated Americans this summer, and it could get busier over the holidays. But before you even board a flight, you must upload your CDC vaccine card to the airline's website. Many countries' health departments also require it. Europeans use a phone app that displays their vaccination status.
Bonjour.
Americans can use their CDC cards, but don't forget it. Here in France, you need to show your CDC vaccine card to eat at a restaurant. You'll also show your card to get into art shows and sporting events. You even show your vaccine pass to go hiking through a French national park.
We've had to show it to get on an airplane. We've had to show it to get into restaurants, museums, to any kind of public place. And it's fine. We're good with that.
While the rules change often, most European countries do require Americans to provide proof of vaccination, but don't require further testing or quarantine. Though Sweden is not allowing Americans to fly directly from the U.S., and Britain still requires testing. Despite sporadic protests, Europeans generally support the mandates. Masks required in grocery stores, train stations, even some outdoor markets.
If it means that we can travel, that's so be it.
Returning home to the U.S. does require a test.
So we're going to swab each nostril beginning with your left.
I used one that I bought from the airline that requires a video call with the technician who verifies the results after 15 minutes. I see only one pink line on the test card. I think I'm negative.
You have tested negative for COVID-19.
COVID negative and free to fly home. Tom Costello, NBC News.
Thanks, Tom Costello, for that report. Around the world, more climate activists are being killed, losing their lives for trying to save the planet. That's according to a grim report by the nonprofit group Global Witness. It says 2020 was the deadliest year yet, with the majority of murders taking place in Central and South America. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson takes a closer look at this worrying trend.
No es un crimen defender nuestros propios derechos como pueblos indígenas.
These are the voices of climate activists across Latin America. Voices that have now been silenced forever.
Esos títulos deberían de ser para las comunidades indígenas.
Like that of Oscar Irad Adams, forever encapsulated in this video with Grupo Reforma, demanding water rights for indigenous groups in northern Mexico. Last year, he was shot dead in his home by a group of armed men.
Estaba siendo visible, ¿no?, la desfachatez del gobierno del estado en cuanto al uso y la entrega, ¿no?, a las empresas del agua.
Adams is just one of more than 200 climate activists murdered in 2020, the deadliest year to date, according to a new report by nonprofit group Global Witness. The group finds that an average of 4 climate activists have been killed every week since the Paris Climate Agreement was signed in 2015. Deaths like that of activist Berta Caceres in Honduras, Gonzalo Cardona Molina in Colombia, and Roberto Carlos Pacheco Villanueva in Peru. The majority of these attacks occurring in regions with some of the most lush and diverse landscapes, often threatened by exploitation.
About 30% of the killings can be linked back to these climate-wrecking, heavily polluting industries.
Logging and deforestation are tied to the highest number of killings, with 23 recorded across Brazil, Nicaragua, Peru, and the Philippines. Murders that go largely unsolved.
These companies aren't being held to account for these killings. Governments aren't investigating them enough, and it's something that needs a change on the national and the local level.
Yo creo que no importa mancharnos de tierra. This violence now posing a threat to the next generation of activists.
Cada día, no el día de la tierra, cada día del año
Es una oportunidad más para poder cuidar y defender la vida.
12-year-old Francisco Vera has been fighting for climate protections since he was 7, traveling across Colombia and educating his more than 550,000 followers on social media.
Cuando me levanto veo las majestuosas montañas de los Andes, ¿sí? Y eso es algo espectacular, sí, que yo creo que en el planeta es único en el universo y que hay que cuidar.
This year, Francisco began receiving death threats on Twitter, threats that are all too real in Colombia, the world leader in the number of murdered environmental activists.
Ser activista ambiental es como hacer un deporte extremo. Hablo de tal cosa del medio ambiente y ya directamente la gente empieza con amenazas.
Francisco and his family have now left Colombia. He continues to spread his message online as calls to protect both the climate and its activists grow.
Oh, what an incredible report. Thank you, Priscilla Thompson. Let's now look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Matt Bradley joins us from London. Matt, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe. So I want to start off with that ongoing drama with Alexei Navalny in Russia. You've heard that name before. On Monday, the European Parliament nominated him for their annual Human Rights Prize, and this is as European Union lawmakers. They're trying to keep Navalny's name in the spotlight and trying to keep some of the pressure off of his pro-democracy network in Europe. And this announcement comes as Russian authorities have opened yet another new investigation into Navalny and his allies, and they're charging them with setting up an extremist group, and it's just the latest charge against Navalny. He could face up to 10 years in jail. Now, former Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida of Japan won the Liberal Democratic Party leadership race on Monday. That's the LDP. That victory virtually ensures that he's going to become Japan's next prime minister, probably within days, ahead of upcoming elections in just a couple of weeks. Now, he's considered the establishment candidate there. So, in some lighter news, senior royals joined actor Daniel Craig on the red carpet for James Bond's long-awaited latest outing. Now, Craig told Sky News he's greatly relieved that his new 007 film, No Time to Die, is finally going to be shown in cinemas. So that new Bond film, it's Craig's last film as James Bond, and it was delayed for 18 months already. But now it's finally out, and apparently, guys, it's been getting rave reviews.
I remember he promoted it on SNL in March of 2020, right before everything shut down.
Right.
So it's been a long time.
I can't wait to see it, and had some royal viewers last night, as we saw. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, Matt.
Now, despite making up nearly 20% of the population in the U.S., Hispanic and Latino actors are facing an epidemic of invisibility in Hollywood. But as NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez shows us, young actors are now demanding change in front of the camera and behind it.
This is the first, written Latino character, and it's crazy. It's mind-boggling. I can't even wrap my head around it. It's not going to feel real until I'm there on the first day on set.
Xolo Maridueña's Breaking Barriers. The 20-year-old actor known for his roles in Cobra Kai and Parenthood is set to star as Blue Beetle, DC Comics' first standalone movie with a Latino lead. But the road to superhero hasn't always been easy.
Or at what point do you think that you started to realize that there were stereotypes in the industry?
You know, I think I was pretty oblivious to it until I started noticing it in those casting auditions. I went into this audition room, we finished the scene, and the directors, or whoever, the casting director's like, nice, awesome. Now, could we add a little bit more of that East LA accent? And I'm thinking in my head, but I am from East LA. This is how I sound. And she says hey, more along the lines of you know how Speedy Gonzalez sounds, or kind of that realm. And I must have been maybe 10 or 11, maybe 12 at that point. I'm like, oh, okay, I understand what she wants. There we go. And I read the damn audition some cartoon character.
Xolo says instances like this are why Hollywood needs a makeover from top down.
These writers, these directors, the people behind the camera aren't Latinos. We can throw Latinos in front of the camera all day, but the reality is I have a movie set in Mexico, set in Guatemala, set in wherever, and I don't have people who around me who that is their experience. How am I going to know if that's authentic? I think we're moving in the right direction, no doubt about it. That being said, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
While Latinx people make up nearly 20% of the U.S. population, Latinx actors made up less than 6% of all film roles in 2020.
Why do you think that there's a gap there?
I just feel like when we do have these certain roles for us, it's not roles that we deserve. They're stereotypical. So we need more roles like Julie for our community.
Madison Reyes was cast as Julie in Netflix's hit Julie and the Phantoms after a nationwide casting call for a young Latinx girl. The 17-year-old had almost given up on acting when she sent in her tape to audition. She says as one of the few students of color at her performing arts school, she had to be her own biggest cheerleader.
So I went up to the teacher again, and I was like, "Hello, sir. I got a call back, and it's between me and 2 other girls." And he proceeded to say, "That just means that there's a 33.3% chance of you actually getting it." This is just a clear indication of representation on how it is for us and anybody of minority in the industry. How hard it is. We will literally be dropped down to a percentage, a number of the possibility of us actually getting a role. I hope that as I get older, I can be the bridge that kind of paves the way, along with so many other, strong Latin women in the community who have already done so much.
What would you say to a young, aspiring actress who's Latinx, who's feeling discouraged and like this just might not happen for her?
The biggest thing that I have taken away from this whole experience is I have learned to embrace who I am. My culture, my heritage, my ethnicity, my background, everything. Because when you have that confidence in yourself, you can do anything.
All right, Issa, thank you so much for that. Now, coming up, new bombshell allegations against Jamie Spears ahead of a crucial conservatorship hearing today.
Will claims of surveillance on his pop star daughter affect his standing? We're going to dive in next. After an 11-year hiatus from TV, one of the most popular crime dramas of all time is coming back. Cue the dramatic little intro there. The original Law and Order is returning to NBC after going off the air in 2010. The iconic show first premiered on NBC in 1990 and ran for 20 seasons, making it one of the longest-running primetime dramas in TV history. The Law & Order franchise has lived on for the past decade through several spin-offs, including Law & Order SVU. According to Tuesday's announcement, the show will pick back up where it left off in 2010. I don't quite know what that means, just more cases, I guess. But no details have been given yet for a premiere date or who's actually going to be starring in the show. I was thinking back just at all the great people who starred in that franchise. Sam Watterson, the great Jerry Orbach, Senator Fred Thompson used to be on the show. I mean, so many people.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, funny. They'll pick right back up, just looking 10 years down the road.
Exactly.
One time I got to do a panel with the whole cast of Law & Order SVU, along with Dick Wolf, the creator. It was a highlight. Yeah. Very cool. Thanks, Joe. All right, now we're getting new details in the Britney Spears conservatorship case ahead of a critical hearing later today. A former member of Spears' security team claims Spears' father monitored all of Britney's calls and text messages and even recorded her in her bedroom. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa has more.
In a newly released New York Times documentary, a former security team member speaks for the first time. He alleges that her father, Jamie Spears, the president of Britney's security team, Eden Yemeni, and a member of her management team, Robin Greenhill, tapped into her phone and bugged Britney's bedroom.
Her intimate relations were closely managed.
How you doing, Brittany?
Britney could not have someone in the privacy of her house without those 3 people knowing.
The 3 allegedly logging into her phone's iCloud to monitor Britney's messages, FaceTime calls, and photographs, including communications with her lawyer. Surveillance allegedly extended into her bedroom, where the recordings captured over 180 hours of audio.
I had them tell me what was on it. They seemed very nervous and said that it was extremely sensitive, that nobody can ever know about this, and that's why I need to delete everything on it so there's no record of it.
Jamie's attorney insisting he operated within the parameters set by the court. His lawyer responding his actions were done with the knowledge and consent of Britney, her court-appointed attorney, and/or the court. His counterparts also releasing statements taking issue with the documentary. The stunning allegations come just ahead of a critical court hearing. Britney's lawyer filing another motion this week after the secret recording accusations came to light, demanding once again her father's immediate removal as conservator, calling Jamie's alleged actions an unconscionable and disgraceful violation of her privacy rights, adding Mr. Spears has crossed unfathomable lines. Such behavior, legal experts say, could land Britney's father in hot water, especially in California.
Because California is a two-party consent state, what does that mean for Jamie Spears? Could he be in legal trouble?
Yes, he could definitely be in legal trouble because there are criminal penalties for invading people's privacy in this manner. If he has a judge's order, then he's not in legal trouble. But if he doesn't, he's got a problem.
For more on this, we want to bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Danny, thanks for joining us. So as Emily just reported, there are some major accusations against Jamie Spears that he tapped his daughter's phones, bugged her bedroom. Today, a judge will hear arguments on whether he should be removed as Britney's conservator. Could a documentary like this latest one that's making so many headlines actually impact the hearing?
Absolutely. I mean, these documentaries that have been coming out about Britney can affect her in a positive way and in a negative way as well. On the one hand, to the extent the documentaries may feature some, I don't know, erratic behavior on her Instagram, that could subtly influence the court. But on the other hand, these documentaries have brought awareness to the entire issue of conservatorships, and particularly Britney's conservatorship, which is arguably the most unusual, unconventional conservatorship in the history of conservatorships.
Wow. And Danny, to your point, in terms of these making an impact since these documentaries have come out, we've had all these incremental updates and developments. And as our viewers may remember, earlier this month, Jamie Spears filed a petition to end the conservatorship. So can you explain to us why the hearing today is still necessary if it seems both parties are saying that this can end?
Just because the conservatee and the conservator feel like there isn't any more need for a conservatorship doesn't mean the court doesn't need to make sure for itself that a conservatorship is still not necessary. In other words, you can imagine a situation where a conservatee is completely unable to take care of himself and the conservator is not a particularly good conservator. Well, the court still needs to get some kind of medical testimony, some kind of scientific testimony, some evidence that as a court, it will be safe to release this person from the conservatorship.
Danny, these new documentaries have re-energized the Free Britney movement, but we haven't heard much from the pop star lately beyond her social media posts. Do we have any idea if Britney will speak during these court proceedings, and would it really be to her advantage to speak right now?
She might speak. It's up to the court. It's up to what burden of, or rather what evidence the court wants to hear. But also, perhaps Britney shouldn't speak, and not just because of it's Britney, but the conservatee, if they have the evidence they need to get what they want, there may be no benefit in putting Britney or any conservatee on the stand. Unless, but of course, you know, to the extent she should be heard and wants to be heard, she should be heard by the court.
All right, Danny Cevallos, as always, we so appreciate your expertise, especially on this one. You've helped us out for a while now. Thank you so much.
In a move to help struggling veterans, President Biden signed into law a pilot program that will connect them with service dogs.
That's right, and it comes as a stunning report from the Veterans Affairs Office found that as many as 20 out of 100 veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan have PTSD. Well, NBC News Now correspondent Isa Gutierrez connected with veterans who say service dogs have helped in ways they never could have imagined.
And we do want to note for our viewers, this story does touch on the topic of suicide.
Without this type of program and recovery, I would be dead or in jail. Stay. I was in the U.S. Army from 2007 to 2011. I was paired with Bobby here in 2018, and we have been together ever since.
Like many veterans, Becca Stevens struggled with her mental health after her deployment in Iraq. She suffered from PTSD, anxiety, and even had thoughts of suicide.
While you're deployed, it's like you're an ice cube in a freezer. And when you come home, it's like bringing that ice cube out of the, you're just gonna start melting everywhere. I was completely numb and dead on the inside, and that led me down a road of opiate addiction.
Becca knew she needed help. She went into rehab and worked with a therapist on and off for 7 years, but she still didn't feel like herself. One of Becca's providers at the VA recommended she look for a job working with animals. That's when she found Canines for Warriors, and eventually her dog, Bobby.
How did your life change when Bobby showed up?
I have never worked so hard in my life to get a dog to like me. And it really helped my recovery, because you want to be the best person you can be for this dog that's going to do everything for you.
Canines for Warriors is a Florida-based nonprofit that trains service dogs and pairs them with veterans.
When I came down and got my dog, it was just one of those things where I knew I was okay.
Like Becca, Greg Wells struggled after his deployment to Afghanistan.
But I was actually removed from the country because of PTSD.
But he found instant comfort in his dog, Utah. So much so that after completing the program himself, Greg now works as the lead trainer at Canines for Warriors.
To be able to help one person, if I've done anything right at all, and I've helped and affected one person in one way, then it's absolutely benefits.
Dogs like Utah and Bobby are trained with commands for their warriors' specific needs.
Our warrior program is 21 days long, and it goes from the pairing process to healing with your dog to going out in public with your dog and training. And then we do all the, I think there's 17 service dog commands that we do.
For a lot of veterans, they don't like people behind them. They don't like people approaching from behind. You know, it's our blind side. So when we put our dog in this look position, they actually swing over to our side and look behind us and give us the ability to not have to worry. Basically, if you're having anxiety, if you're depressed, anything like that, you can use the command my lap, and the dog will get in your lap, in your face, and cause you to focus on them. So you will stroke them, pet them, talk to them.
Bobby even helped her talk to us.
I can now do things that I never dreamed I would do. For example, this interview. I would never be able to speak in public, speak to a stranger, much less get across anything that I really think is important. She's been the greatest improvement to my life that I could ever have asked for.
And now the federal government is taking notice. President Biden recently signed the Puppies Assisting Wounded Service Members for Veterans, or PAWS Act, into law. It requires the Veterans Affairs Office to set up a 5-year program to provide dogs and training to veterans with PTSD. Greg hopes it'll help fill a growing need.
Yeah, right now our wait list is out to 2025, and it's always been kind of a bottleneck for the wait list is the availability of dogs. And it's also going to allow the VA to start setting up benefits a little bit more regularly than they have in the past. We're 100% on board with the PAWS Act, and we think it's a great thing.
We're talking about an epidemic when it comes to veteran suicide. For there to be a program in place where more veterans can get the information that they need, it gives me goosebumps, because so many people that I know could benefit from this. This is going to be huge, and I couldn't be more excited about the future when it comes to that.
And now, if you or anyone you know is struggling, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255 or text TALK to 741-741. And what an amazing report from Isa.
Yeah, it's something we can all agree on, the power of puppies.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.